Hi, thanks for watching. Okay, so in this video, I'd like to talk about Joe Biden. Okay, I think I've mentioned Joe Biden in other videos that I've done, but I've sort of avoided maybe going all out on him, maybe because I myself maybe have had my reservations, and also, just a natural hesitation to really assess somebody who's super high profile, because a lot of their actions may actually reflect more like what they're it may be more like what his advisors tell him, and you never know how much of what he does is his own personal personality. But to be quite honest, I've suspected this for a long time, and I've always sort of had a funny feeling about Biden. But it's funny because he never really pushed my buttons that much until recently. In other words, I knew he was a goofball. I knew he was had a tendency to kind of exaggerate and lie and not really be very straightforward. But it's only seeing him in the pressure cooker of like world events. Okay, like the pressure cooker of, like, say, the situation in Ukraine, and the pressure cooker of like, for example, the way they got out of Afghanistan. And really, I think that was a disgrace. Okay, because I'm not saying you shouldn't get out of Afghanistan. All right. But there are ways to do anything. Okay. And the way they did that, to me, showed a tremendous lack of leadership. Okay. But so bad that now looking at other issues, okay, the way the Ukraine situation unfolded, the way the Israeli situation is unfolded, okay, and also maybe the way he deals with Saudi Arabia, Iran. Now I'm to the point where I'm comfortable saying, I think that Joe Biden, honestly, I really think that if he's not actually, like, say, a diagnosable, like, say, narcissist or psychopath, he definitely has traits, okay, and so bad that it's enough to cause problems in what he does. And I think, honestly, to be quite honest, I think he might be okay as a person if he's just a grandfather in the backyard, if he's just doing the barbecue with his grandchildren, whatever, minus the one grandchild that he won't even recognize because he's such an asshole, right? I'm sorry. I mean, because you have to be kind of an asshole, right? I say that knowing that I'm kind of an asshole, all right, but calling it what he is, all right. But like, just if you were just to look at Joe Biden as just as a grandfather with his family, whatever, or maybe some anonymous job, but to be the president of the United States, I would say, um, I really think that given what he's trying to do, and what he thinks he can do in the world compared to what he really can do, I'd say he's a jerk and an asshole. I really would say that, and I would say that he is definitely, I think, on the radar screen, at least in the subclinical range of, I think, cluster B personality disorder. All right, either narcissism or psychopath. Now, I realize that I'm not exactly neutral. It's funny because I'm not even a Republican, to be quite honest. I don't like really the full-blown Republican, mindset, really. I tend to be a more of a neutral person, but I definitely have been annoyed by Democrats lately because they live in a fog of fantasy, really, and they're like allergic to realpolitik. Realpolitik. The idea that you have to deal with things practically, looking beyond the ideologies, and the Republicans do that too. To be quite honest, because some realpolitik, that the Republicans haven't learned is that getting along with people is a big part of the recipe of any political success, right? And that even if other people are stupid, even if other people have bad ideas, okay, you can't get so brittle and so abrasive and combative that you can no longer get along with people on the other side to at least make things work. You know what I mean? Even sort of humoring people that have stupid ideas just to kind of grease the wheels and make things work. And so, in a way, I think both the Republicans and the Democrats are guilty of not allowing themselves to think more realistically about politics. And anybody can just look up the term realpolitik. It's just kind of a more pragmatic approach to politics. But that said, okay, even despite how I feel about the Democrats, and really a lot of Democrats, like, for example, Neera Tanden, if anybody knows Neera Tanden, there are lots of examples in the Republican Party, probably even Hillary Clinton, people who really are, honest to God, have almost like, I would say they have this basically just offensive personalities, really, really disgusting personalities. All right, to the point that I think they deserve to be on the at least on the spectrum of, like, say, narcissism or psychopathy. So, what do I now see in Joe Biden that I think deserves to be categorized as like almost psychopathic or almost narcissistic? Okay, well, the one telltale that I saw in him, a couple of telltales. The first thing that really kind of tipped me off with Joe Biden was when he made it totally public totally public, that the US knew that Russia was planning some kind of invasion of Ukraine. Okay. He said this like 10 days or 7 to 10 days in advance of the actual penetration into Ukraine. All right. And later it comes out that there were actual possible negotiations on the table that Russia would have accepted, and even Ukraine may potentially have accepted. All right. There were places where even Ukraine was willing to possibly accept certain negotiations to avoid the war. And when Biden gave his public message, okay, and public messages are important. I understand that back channel, and behind the curtain, I know that sometimes the messaging is actually different between countries, but the public messaging is important. And Biden basically just said, yeah, we have information that Russia could be doing this, and we just say publicly they shouldn't do it. If they do it, they're going to be a bad person. All right, that is exactly being a bad leader on the part of Joe Biden, because what he's doing is he is no longer being a leader in a situation. He's sitting back and letting it happen so that he can react to it. Okay. And if there's one thing that's a telltale for people who are alcoholic, for people that are drug addicts, for people that have personality disorders, we tend to be people that tend to react to situations as opposed to being a little more proactive to maybe prevent problems. Okay. And that to me was a classic situation of a very irresponsible that was a very irresponsible posture on Joe Biden's part, because he was basically letting Russia have the lead to decide how things would go. And Biden was like giving up his agency to maybe influence the situation to prevent that thing from happening. Okay. And that to me is dangerous, irresponsible, and it shows a person who doesn't have the goddamn guts to actually get in and influence a situation as opposed to reacting. And in the world politics and global politics, that's dangerous. Okay. Because when things, when people don't take the right leadership and the right initiative ahead of a situation, if you don't get ahead of a situation and you just sit back flat-footed and let things happen, you're going to always be a few steps behind the front of the actual action. You know what I mean? So in other words, Biden puts himself in the position of being a chronic reactor. Okay. The same thing with Afghanistan. Oh, we got the situation in Afghanistan. My God, we find ourselves in this situation. Okay, well, let's just get out. It's like he's not a real manager. And this shows that Biden's not a manager. He's not a leader and he's not a manager, because a true manager does not just take an action, does not just like react to a situation. A real manager looks at all the fallout from a situation. Okay. So Biden would say, okay, our goal is to get out of Afghanistan. Okay. But now let's look at the mechanics, the logistics. Okay. And let's see, okay, could we just pull out, or do we have to do a few maneuvers, a few steps along the way? You know what I mean? To at least make it not look so disgraceful, not to be such a clusterfuck, how they got out of that one Air Force base or that one military base where you had like thousands of people like grabbing onto like C-17 cargo jets. Okay. And basically you had like these people like in their, I don't know how you say, their tunics, their robes or whatever, they're like grabbing and hanging on to the C-17, and they get up to like 400 feet and you see individuals like dropping off the airplane, and it's just like a spectacular disgrace, and on top of that, like apparently they just pulled the plug so quickly that very suddenly there was like a power vacuum, and like lots of people were just killed, even people that had been loyal to the United States, right? So basically, a leader does not just say, okay, we have this problem, let's just get out. It's like, oh, I have an itch, let's just scratch it. No, it's like, okay, I have an itch, but what do I do? Because if I just scratch it, I could actually infect it. You know what I mean? Like thinking through the logistics. But apparently for Biden, that's just too much of a headache, and he can't be bothered to actually process through, like say, okay, let's do it, but it may take 4 months and we'll go A, B, C, and D. He doesn't have the logistical maturity because he's just a reactor. It's like, oh, itch, scratch, he doesn't get ahead of things. He doesn't have a management mindset. Right. And the same thing with Ukraine. Oh, geez, we got this problem. Russia says they're going to do this. Okay, well, if they do it, then, they're in trouble. It's like more difficult, more of a stomach ache would be to get ahead of it and say, hey, look, for the next, Biden could have said, look, for the next 4 days, we're not going to sleep in this White House. Okay. For the next 4 days, we are going to put the most intense energy in the planet, because we are going to call meeting after meeting, and we're going to call red alert with all the all the right ambassadors, and we are going to meeting this way, and we're going to put meetings and meetings until the Russians finally sign, because we are not going to allow a war, And I said, I'll tell you, the next 4 days, we're not going to sleep in this place. And I guarantee you, I'll bet you Biden did sleep those days. I'll bet you he slept very well. I bet you he only worked 4 to 6 hours a day. Okay. And so basically, I see a person who doesn't really have the guts and doesn't really have even the inclination to get inside a situation and lead it as opposed to following it. All right. And why do I think that that's narcissistic or psychopathic? Okay. All right. Here's what I see. The final telltale that I saw with Biden was that when he was asked under pressure, okay, whether the United States was really in a situation to be handling a multi-war panorama right now, where we have a war in Ukraine, and now we're going to have this apparently a war in the Middle East, with Israel and Hamas, and all these things dividing our resources as Americans. The United States now, we have to put more than one aircraft carrier in the Mediterranean just for Israel, and all these resources on top of what we're doing with Ukraine. And Biden's answer to me was the most disrespectful, most casual, most I guess it almost showed that he just doesn't give a shit. Okay, because he's like he just says, "Oh, we're the United States of America. Oh, we're the United States of America. What do you mean? We can handle. We're the United States of America." I'll tell you something. Just the way he said that and the way he's thinking. All right, you can tell that Biden, he acts very serene. Okay, but he doesn't have serenity that comes from clarity. Okay, he has what I call the fog of serenity, the fake serenity, the serenity that comes through the cotton fog of just not seeing clearly what's happening in the world and not really taking to heart the actual risks. Okay, in other words, he just puts this fog on his head, like, "Oh, we're the United States, we're the United States, we're the United States. Oh, what do you mean? We're the United States." It's like, that's a fog. The clarity is, yeah, we may be the United States, but why do we want to have all these big problems going on in the world? And could it be a problem for us regardless? That's more realistic. He doesn't have that clarity because he's just, oh, the United States. It's like this fog of serenity. That is the telltale whenever you're dealing with people who are alcoholic, who come from, like, say, cluster B alcoholic families, people that come from, like, say, personality disorder, toxic kind of whatever, where people just fall into, like, "Oh no, Johnny, he's going to do fine. He got a, like, oh, my son, you're telling me my son's drinking? Oh no, my son's a letterman. He plays varsity football. My son, he can't do, just that kind of stupid fog where you put yourself into a comfort zone when actually your situation is not for a comfort zone. Okay, so Biden has a false comfort zone, and it comes across as a serenity, but it's the serenity of fog. It's not the serenity of being clear. All right. So you put all those things together, and I see somebody who is just too wrapped up in his own deluded serenity. Okay. And I think that is actually, sorry, guys, I got dogs. They're not my dogs. I don't have time to make more takes. I'm very sorry. Okay. Apologize, guys. Apologize. All right. So I think that when you put all these things together, I think that is on the spectrum of narcissism and psychopathy. Why do I say that? Because I think that the fundamental core of psychopathy. Sorry, guys. Please be patient. I don't have time to do another take. I'm so sorry. I hope it doesn't sound so much on the microphone. Okay, but I think the core of psychopathy and narcissism, yes, we all know the typical symptoms. Okay, everybody knows that psychopaths they're kind of cold. They don't have a lot of feelings. They have superficial feelings. They kind of don't really sense consequences. They don't really plan ahead. They just kind of react to things. That's the basic thing. But the real core aspect of psychopathy to me is having too much primal stimulation. All right. And basically getting so much caught up in primal stimulation that it prevents you, it's almost like a fog. It prevents you from really interacting and dealing with the world really as it is and as it should be interacted. Okay. So for example, like, I know that psychopaths that come across as very calm, but what we don't understand is that there's another layer of emotionality, okay, which doesn't come across in typical emotions. All right. It's a layer of emotionality that, instead of being like typically emotional, it's more like seething. Okay. And it can come across as a cotton of fake serenity, right? It's sort of like a cotton. I call it the fog or the cotton of serenity, but it's like living in cotton. where you can't see through it, basically. And that cotton is produced by a seething. It's basically seething. And so these people, they chronically have too much primal stimulation, but it comes across as a fog of calm. You know what I mean? It's paradoxical presentation. All right. And I think narcissists often have that as well. When a narcissist seems very cool and just kind of chill, like not very emotional, that chill may be a fake chill. It may be a false chill in the sense that it comes from a seething because there's too much primal stimulation. All right. I think that's what's underneath the typical symptoms that we all know from the DSM. I think underneath that's like the machine language that produces those symptoms. So I call it the fog or the cotton of fake, pseudo serenity, basically. And just always being sort of on the reactive side of things, as opposed to having the guts and staying up all night and just, taxing yourself. Like, say, what we did not see from the Biden presidency is, look, we're not going to sleep in this White House, and we're going to fucking work 4 days, day and night. We're not going to sleep until we get these things negotiated and settled. You know what I mean? Like for Ukraine or even for the Afghanistan. We're not going to do a C+ job of getting out of Afghanistan. This is going to be an A+ job, and we're going to do it with all the logistics, blah, blah, blah. And we're going to do it right. Because why? Because our image on the public stage is part of our reputation as a country, right? And Biden pissed on the reputation of the United States. He took a shit on the reputation of the United States. By the way, he just unplugged from Afghanistan because he just can't be asked to give a shit that far in advance. He only does things like right where the itch scratches. He can't see enough ahead because he lives in the fog, in the cotton of, I would say, primal stimulation. It produces a cotton effect. And you just can't see ahead, and it gives you too much of a stomach ache. And I don't want to get into all the logistics. And we're going to have to stay up all night for 4 days. It's like we take it easy around here. That's not real serenity. That's fake serenity. Okay, that's pseudo serenity, and it comes from deep down inside too much primal stimulation, where you got so much fog going on. It's like a protective fog that you can't be asked in your stomach to say, okay, we're going to work our asses up. We're going to roll up our sleeves and we're going to make this the moon landing project. This will be the Apollo project of doing things the right way, getting even the simplest maneuver of getting out of a country. But no, Biden is just a slop. He's a slop. Okay. He's a slop, a guy who doesn't even know how to work an 8-hour day. All right. And all those things put together, he looks to me like, don't trust his calm actingness. Okay. When he says, oh, we're the United States, and he seems so calm, don't trust that calmness. That calmness comes from living in a chronic hyperactivity, overstimulation, over excessive primal stimulation. And people like that. If they have the fires on the inside, essentially, they are unconsciously going to sleepwalk into fires over and over again. Okay. They're going to unconsciously sleepwalk into fires over and over again because that's their baseline. Okay. And whatever is deep down inside in your baseline, you're going to end up repeating over and over, and you're going to find yourself, and then you're going to end up reacting when things are out of control. Okay. And so as far as this thing in Israel, Biden probably, if he was smart, okay, and if he was a real chess player and he was like dedicated to being the smartest tactician on the planet, he would say, okay, look, he would tell his cabinet this. He would say, look, now we have this war in Ukraine, which they should have prevented. All right. But now we have the war in Ukraine. Okay, if we're really going to be smart, we are on red alert in this White House. Okay, because we're so tied up in Ukraine, and because now Russia is going to be so eaten up with this war in Ukraine. Okay, that's going to weaken the axis of Iran and Russia. Okay, because the world operates in terms of East and West and axes of power, right? So you have the axis of the West, which is the United States, okay, but then you have the axis of Russia, Iran, and maybe China, whatever. It's a different axis, right? So now that Russia is being weakened by this Ukraine thing, okay, we have to be on red alert, because any weakening with Russia is going to, in a sense, be a threat to Iran, because they're in a similar axis, right? And because Iran is really tied to the Palestinians, all right? Okay, and also Iran, I think, is tied to Yemen as well. Okay, basically, as we see, sorry about the dogs, guys. Please bear with me. I don't have control over my neighbors. It's very embarrassing to me. Okay, I'm so sorry. Okay, but what Biden would have said, sorry, please. What Biden would have said, look, we're tied up in Ukraine. Okay, let the dogs be the soundtrack to the psychopathic mind, right? Please. Okay, what Biden would have told the White House, he would have said, "Look, okay, we have this war in Ukraine. All right, while this war in Ukraine is sapping, it's like a cancer to Russia. It's like sapping from the bone marrow of Russia. All right, and so while Russia is put in a very vulnerable position as they're depleting resources for this Ukraine, that is going to make Iran more insecure because they're in the same axis. All right. And that's going to have effects in the satellite situations of Yemen and Palestine, because Palestine is sort of an extension of Iran to some extent, at least in terms of leadership. Right. And so Biden would have said, look, this is a perfect time for Iran indirectly to maybe, or Russia through Iran, maybe to try to provoke some distractions in the Middle East, which could maybe sort of serve to sort of tip the chemistry that's affecting what's going on in Ukraine. You see what I mean? And I mean, Russia could say, the best thing that could happen for Russia would be a major, major expensive distraction in the Middle East, which could just relieve the pressure just enough to change the dynamics in Ukraine. You never know, but at least that could be the thinking, right? So like a real president who's on top of it, who doesn't just work 6 hours or 4 hours a day, somebody who's goddamn on top of things could have said, look, we have to look ahead and anticipate. But you see, I think Biden subconsciously, because he has so much primal stimulation, like the flames going on the inside. He's got that, I think, that narcissistic, primal stimulation on the inside. That explains the fog of his pseudo serenity, right? I think basically, in a way, that's his baseline, right? And so I think in a way, it's almost like I think for him, he would perceive it as, oh, it would be too much trouble to get overly paranoid about the Middle East. Oh no, he'd say, hey, no, the Middle East is doing great. The Middle East is doing great, because he doesn't like to see ahead and to look for problems. He just likes to look at the status quo and find things to say good about it. You know what I mean? Find good ways to look at the status quo as opposed to looking ahead and looking for problems, right? But so I think in a funny way, I think his baseline of like seething and burning, basically, I think almost is like congruent with letting things happen in the world, because he doesn't put his fog lights on. Basically, he doesn't want to put his fog lights on. He's just okay with the fog, basically. So I think a good president would have said, we need to be on more alert for things going on with Palestine and maybe with Yemen, because these are little satellites of Iran, and Iran is sort of in the same axis as Russia. And you have to understand that it would always benefit Russia to have some big distraction in the Middle East. So just to be on more heightened alert, and then to tell Israel to be more proactive and say, watch it. You guys are in a much more vulnerable situation because of what's happening in Ukraine. You know what I mean? Just looking at it from a global point of view, being a little more sort of looking ahead. But as we can now see with Biden, what he doesn't do is he doesn't look ahead. And he doesn't like to look ahead, and he likes to instead find the wonderful things about the present. He looks for pearls in the haystack of all kinds of garbage, just to make himself feel good. And then he repeats for himself these mantras about, oh, we're the United States, like not seeing what's going on. Also, even if Biden, let's say, is a true Democrat, okay, and Democrats just are not programmed to be worried about the border in the United States, okay. If he was a real person that had integrity, he'd say, okay, I'm part of the Democratic Party, so I'm supposed to not be worried about the border. I get that. But privately, I am worried about the border. I am worried about too many immigrants flooding different cities. I can both have my party affiliation. Okay, that's how I'm supposed to feel. But personally, I have my feelings. At least that shows integrity. No. For Biden, that would cause too much strain. That would cause too much dissonance. So he just goes to the fog of everything's fine. And, I'm with the party. And that fog of serenity, that cotton of serenity, I guarantee you comes from deep down inside. It comes from a baseline of too much primal stimulation, too much primal arousal. And when people are like that, they're too seething on the inside to be able to deal with all the pesky dotting the I's and crossing the T's and having conflicting ideas and going through a full analysis and putting the fog lights on. What ends up coming up is like a fog, and that fog actually comes from the seething on the inside. And then what happens is the baseline, however seething and burning, that'll end up getting played out in the real life, and things will be more chaotic. It's a weird thing. And don't fall for this thing where when people look psychopathic and when people look narcissistic, that means they're actually calm on the inside. That it's a fog. It's a fog that is a pseudo serenity, but really on the inside, there's a lot of seething going on. And when people have too much primal activation, primal stimulation, they don't have the true calm to actually deal with real problems. It's a weird paradoxical thing. The mechanics of it doesn't seem intuitive, but actually that, I think, when people have more clarity on the inside and they're more truly calm, they have more mental resources to actually deal with aggravating and conflicting and incongruent, frustrating things, and they can take more mental energy to actually focus on getting ahead of a problem and actually leading it. So whenever you see people that are they're sort of sleepwalking and flat-footed and always reacting to a problem, and they always seem a few feet behind the front of a problem. Okay, telltale sign is they're probably way too consumed on the inside by too much primal stimulation. And that produces, I think, a weird paradoxical fog of serenity, because they don't want to go into the front and actually deal with the real turbulence of life to get ahead of a problem. And Biden, to me, is absolutely characteristic of that. And it took me a while to see it, because I don't like to assess people that are very high profile, because you never know if you're really looking at the true personality, and how much of it is just how they appear in public, or their public sort of their public persona. But I think when we really look through the different angles of how we've seen Biden, and even looking back to the 1980s, in 1988, he was running, 87 or 88, he was running for president. And he was just lying his ass off in public, and just showed that he just didn't have real control over the truth, or control over like his own thinking. He was kind of a deluded person. So now, as I've seen like through decades, and now looking at him, how he actually runs the presidency, where he's actually not a leader at all. He doesn't get ahead of problems. Now I can say for sure that I really think if he's not diagnosable, because you never know if someone's diagnosable, but he's on the spectrum for sure, I think. And I honestly think that, if it was just him being a grandfather, or just working in some anonymous whatever, but for him to think he could be the president of the United States, I'd say that makes him an asshole. I think it makes him an asshole. And if he's not diagnosable, it puts him at least on the spectrum of being, narcissistic or psychopathic. So that's my honest opinion. I'll be honest. And I'm sorry if that doesn't bode well for Democrats. Democrats need to get their act together. They live with their heads in their asses in fantasy. And everybody, even the Republicans, need a better dose of real politics, more realism, and get outside of all the froth and the fake cotton candy and the pseudo serenity of being wrapped up in a political party or a political vision or an ideological vision, because the real world requires real serenity on the inside to actually deal with real problems as they are, realistically. And I think both sides are guilty, but Biden for sure, that guy, he's a jerk, and I think it's time that people woke up that this guy, like a lot of people who are narcissistic or psychopathic, their pseudo fog, their fog of pseudo serenity is actually very, for some people, it's actually very, it's very persuasive, and people actually fall for it, and they think he's kind of a nice guy. He's not. Nice people get ahead, and they have the guts and the courage to get into the turbulence and get into the frontier and the front of a problem, and not stand back and react to it. And Biden doesn't do that. So no, I don't think he's a good person. So I'm being honest, and appreciate anybody who disagrees. I'm just offering my opinion, but it was my opinion, and this is I am honestly telling my opinion. So anyway, thank you very much, and thanks for watching.